What's really driving the future of IT? How are leaders staying secure, efficient, and ahead of change? Welcome to the Beyond the Firewall podcast, powered by HubTech, where we go past the headlines to talk with technology leaders, industry experts, and IT practitioners shaping how we work, live, and lead. Let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Firewall podcast, powered by HubTech. I'm your host, Adam Schaefer, and today we're stepping into a world where technology, performance, and passion collide: professional sports. Technology has changed nearly every aspect of our lives, but few industries have seen a transformation quite like professional athletics. Technology is redefining the way athletes train, compete, and connect with fans. Joining me today are two incredible guests who live at the intersection of sports and technology. First, we have Randy George, Senior Vice President of Technology for the Boston Red Sox, where he spent more than 2 decades leading innovation and infrastructure at one of the most iconic franchises in professional sports. From orchestrating Fenway Park's full stadium Wi-Fi to advanced digital transformation across operations, Randy knows firsthand how technology and changing the game on and off the field. Second, we have Chris Daggett, Director of Managed Services and Security at HubTech, who helps organizations, including those in sports and entertainment, secure and modernize their technology environments. Together, we'll explore how technology is revolutionizing the world of professional athletics. Welcome to the podcast, Chris and Randy.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm very excited about this one because I've been a baseball fan since I'm a kid, and getting to talk to anyone near baseball is exciting for me. But although most of the folks that work with us are located in New England, I am originally from New York. And Randy, I don't want to just like start off in that way, but I've been a Met fan all my life. And I grew up when '86 Mets were playing Boston. And
oh, you had to bring that up.
Yeah, no, and it was tough for me because
there.
I would go to Boston, and the cab drivers would throw me out of the cabs. Like, it was horrible.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, we've done our share of winning since then, Adam. So we don't hate Mets fans or Yankee fans for that matter.
Thank you. I feel a lot better, and so we can get on with it. And for anybody out in the audience, I don't mean to offend. I'm just, you're born into a sports team usually. Like, it's like a generational thing, and so it's passed down and passed down. And so I was a Mets fan. Apologies to all that aren't Mets fans. So anyway, Randy, I tried to introduce you, and it was kind of brief, but maybe you could give us a little bit more background on you, because I know you've done it all. So maybe just a bit more about you and into the meat of what you do and who you are.
Yeah, sure. Well, I joined the team back in 2002, if you can believe it. It's hard for me to believe that I've almost been with the club for 25 years. It's been an incredible ride, and it's and my first job here, I was actually hired by the late Larry Lucchino, who was our former CEO, and Theo Epstein, our former general manager, who by all accounts should be a Hall of Fame general manager one day. And my first job here, I had the coolest job, at least I thought it was at the time, my job was to come in here and modernize all of our baseball systems, right? And so, and if you recall, back in sort of around that time frame, that was sort of like the golden era of Moneyball. You know, and many sports properties, including us, particularly in baseball, were really evolving to a data-driven sort of enterprise at the time, right? So, like, before that, like scouting and player development was very much sort of like gut feel, and there's still, of course, a lot of that. We have to rely on scouts and player development folks and great coaches to develop our players, and make decisions based on what they're seeing on the field with their eyeballs and experience. But this sport, maybe more than others, and definitely back then, had really started the evolution to modernizing our systems, thinking more strategically about how we incorporate data into decision making. And so I spent the first few years of my career at the Red Sox really sort of fully integrated within baseball operations. Even though I was kind of an IT employee, I lived within baseball ops, and I learned so much about the game during that time. And then later on, as the business grew a little bit, and as our needs for, systems and development and data sort of grew within baseball, I sort of moved over to the business side. I'm still a service provider and, a little bit of a strategic thinker for our baseball operations group to this day. We work very closely with one another. But we have a lot of software engineers, data scientists. It's a much bigger ecosystem of people and tools and talent that we have integrated within baseball. And so my journey is kind of spans like from joining the club when it was very small, maybe 50 full-time employees, where I was basically the only technologist within baseball at the time, to a world today where we're very much an advanced data-driven organization that relies on technology for almost everything that we do. And we have a lot of people in the baseball ops organization sort of doing what I did back in the day as just a single person.
So that's a great segue to so you started kind of in the Moneyball era. I mean, I remember that was like awesome. And of all the sports, I mean, I'm sure every sport will, has their stats and it's really important, but baseball might have, and probably does have, more stats. And, these broadcasters just whip it out, but more stats than anything I've ever seen before. And so from that 2002, when you started, to now, how has technology changed how athletes train and perform, like leveraging those statistics?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot, as you can imagine. I mean, there really was no technology back then, right? So a lot of, think about just like looking at video and preparing for the next opponent. I mean, we were popping in VHS tapes, on a TV in the clubhouse, and delivering, cutting up content for our players to consume to prepare for the next opponent. Now, holy cow, I mean, we have such modern technologies and tools in place. Everything's cloud facing, mobile native. We have very high resolution, high quality video available for our players at their fingertips. Right. And so it's totally different the way that players and even our front office helps our coaching staff prepare the players for their next opponent. And so there's a lot of data, as you noted, Adam, in this business. The challenge is how do we allow players to just play the game? When the first pitch is sort of thrown, there has to be an element of the game that is sort of like reactionary. Like anything else in life, you have to prepare for what it is you're about to sort of go into. But we do think a lot about the information that we deliver to our players, how it is that they digest and consume it and make it actionable for the game that they're about to play that day. So there's a lot we're putting on these guys.
That's I mean, amazing. And so you talked about video. We'll come back to that, because I got a whole bunch of questions on video, because for me, watching a game on television is better sometimes than being there. Although there's nothing more exciting being at the stadium, the angles and what you can see. But let's come back to that. And let's ask Chris kind of a question about, so with all this technology, what's kind of the backbone behind all these systems, like network sensors, like give us the stack, like what does it look like?
So, the stack really, at its core, is similar to any other business. However, there are some other things that, Randy would need to take into consideration. It's, to echo some of the things that he mentioned, we're seeing in the sports arena, an explosion of data volume. Things require high speed, and securing, the information is super important. And, back in the day, scouts and analysts and everything would, leverage film and leverage your instincts, to kind of drive some of the real-time analytics. Now it's just, they have wearables and things like that. And now, the Red Sox, along with the other Major League Baseball teams, just in general, now resemble, mission critical enterprises. It's the foundational pieces are, the infrastructure, the security, the uptime. Those are, mission critical things that need to happen. Uptime is super important. Especially on game day. It's these, the fans, you don't want any disruptions. The fans, they, any kind of technology blip on the radar, that's what keeps Randy up at night. It's, game day. He's got to account for any little pivot, that happens. So, and things need to be resolved quick. So, yeah.
So AI obviously is the big buzzword now, and we're all using it somehow, some way, in everything we do. And in fact, I'm sure that we're using it for AI in the videos too. But I remember, I swear, I wish I could remember the name of the movie, but where there was a woman pitcher, and the stats person or the person watching the stats knew that if they threw one more pitch, they were going to injure their arm, and then she did, and she did break it. I can't, and I wish I could. It was great baseball movie. But I mean, how are coaching decisions and other decisions being made that affect players to prevent injury or to realize they haven't gone enough or they've gone too much? How does that work?
Yeah, well, we have one particular platform here at the club, Adam, called Kinetrax. It's a biomechanical platform, and like if you were here at the park, I would show you kind of like an array of 25 cameras that we have scattered around the perimeter of the ballpark, taking very high resolution, high frame rate biomechanical video of all of our players. And the whole objective of that platform is to break down minor nuances in a player's mechanics that lead to good or bad outcomes, to detect fatigue, to detect poor mechanics that could lead to injury, to your point, right? And so like the way that we look at that data, it's not really sort of like AI driven. We have baseball scientists who are running models against this raw biomechanical video, looking for those little sort of like hidden nuggets that help us coach a player to use the best possible mechanics to achieve the best possible outcomes. Right. So like that's just one sort of example of how we're using sort of a piece of baseball technology, to kind of get ahead of potential injury to a player and how we manage them. Right. So like we know, like as the game goes on, pitchers get fatigued, their arm slot drops a little bit, their velocity drops a little bit, they might lose a little bit of command. We can almost detect precursors to that, right? So like, imagine a world where like, we have all this video on every player, and we can detect these minor nuances and changes in behavior based on where they are within the game, right? So like that allows us to course manage that player at any moment, as the season goes on, right? So there's other technologies that we use to like manage a player's health and prevent injury and all of that stuff, but like that's one glaring example of a more modern technology that most clubs are incorporating nowadays. That's a real difference maker.
And my guess is they're using it for other sports, not just baseball. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of
it's used in other sports. Absolutely. Yep, exactly. Yeah, and incidentally, Hawkeye, you may have heard of them. They're the platform that powers the new automated balls and strike system, our instant replay system. They recently acquired Kinetrax. So, whereas they were two competing platforms, they sort of had they had their strengths and weaknesses as service providers. Now they're sort of coming together, in a single platform that's going to power so many different things for MLB.
So do the players, do they get blown away by all this data? Do they listen to what you're saying? Do they try to figure it out, or is somebody like trying to coach them along the way?
Yeah, I truthfully haven't asked players that direct question, Adam, but like secondhand, I can tell you that, it depends on the player, right? So, like when JD Martinez was here, for example, like he was uber into like tech and capturing every camera angle he could to break down, sort of his balance and mechanics as a hitter. And there are other players who are very much like, gut feel guys, right? And so like they almost don't want to consume too much information because now they're overthinking their approach, right? And that causes other problems, right? So like, it's really up to our front office and our coaching staff to gauge the player's ability to consume information and use that within the game, to manage their approach to the game, right? So it really is dependent on the player.
Yeah, no, I wonder. I don't think I'd want to see myself. I'd get like from every angle. I would get really. I don't like to look at myself anyway, so I don't know how to deal with that. But Chris, you mentioned speed before, and the speed is so important. Are the teams and are most teams using cloud computing and edge computing, like or they have on-premise servers? Like how does it work?
So it all depends on what they're looking to achieve. At the end of the day, the name of the game is, you want to make sure that network latency is at a minimal or none at all. So I'm sure Randy and other professional sports teams, they leverage edge computing to cut down that latency, for quicker responsiveness. On the back end, you need to ensure that, the network is going to accommodate all of the bandwidth required, because it
Mhm.
is a huge spike on the network when it is game day. I mean, if you think about it, you have all of these mobile devices, IoT, everything's hitting the network, right? And, you know, the data needs to stay local in an effort to get that served up quickly. There are some use cases where the cloud stuff would be more appropriate as far as where the data resides, but that would be in you know a situation where the latency really isn't in play or scrutinized as much. But it's important to ensure that the network's quick. There's no blips, because if you think about it, right? If you're broadcasting a sports event, any slowness is going to be, known right away,
Mhm.
from the viewers. And, it's all about that experience for the people viewing the game over the TV, and things like that. So, and the responsiveness of, the network local in the stadium. So,
Mhm.
there's also 5G that comes into play. That's another piece. So, there's absolutely a lot to it, but the name of the game is it's all about speed.
So stay with that. I mean, the fan experience for a minute there, and you know, obviously being connected, smart stadiums, that's kind of the new normal. But what are the technologies that people are using? Is it just mobile phones and 5G? Like what is the technology for using?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have thousands of connected devices here, Adam. I mean, think about like, from the moment you get here, you're going through a digital ticketing turnstile. So we have access control around the perimeter of the gates. We have video surveillance everywhere. We have point of sale technology in play. You mentioned wireless communication. So like we have 700 access points within Fenway Park, to deliver a modern digital experience to our fans, who are coming to the park for a game. There's tons of back office technology that runs every line of business within the stadium. We have the whole video productions apparatus, all the content that you see on the scoreboard and all of the audio and 1,500 TVs around the park. I mean, I could go on and on. There's like
Yeah, yeah.
thousands and thousands of network connected devices. I don't necessarily consider them IoT, but like anything that like is on the network, for me is a device that needs to be secured, managed, properly monitored, and maintained. So there's a fairly broad ecosystem of technologies that we glue together here to deliver the experience that we do.
And I guess I should know this, but I don't get out that often anymore. But
Mhm.
like when I go to the library, I use their Wi-Fi and I log in, but it's a pretty simple login. When you go to the
Mhm.
stadium, do you have to log in, or is it just you're connected?
You're on. This is like a philosophical thing. This is more of like a me thing. When we launched Wi-Fi, God, I want to say the first iteration of whole stadium Wi-Fi was probably in that 2011-ish timeframe. We did have kind of like a proper guest access portal in front of our Wi-Fi system. And what we found was because we were asking our customers to sort of self-identify themselves to get on the Wi-Fi, the take rate for the Wi-Fi was very low. We were expecting, like, we spent millions of dollars on this incredible new stadium Wi-Fi system, and that was at a time where like we didn't have 5G, right? So like there wasn't incredibly fast, ubiquitous, broadly available cellular service everywhere in the stadium. So like Wi-Fi was sort of what you needed to stay connected. And we were surprised when we only saw a few thousand people jump on. We quickly kind of realized that, the reason that they weren't jumping on is because we were just putting friction in front of that
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Right. And
I,
so
I
like
I love it.
ultimately, yeah. And so like we're not trying to monetize our Wi-Fi environment. This is an expected service. This is a service we need to deliver to our fans because we spent lots of money building engaging digital experiences for our customers in the form of the At Bat app and the MLB Ballpark app. Fast forward to today, we're 100% digital ticketing and cashless. So like connectivity is essential to delivering those services. That wasn't necessarily so much the case back then, but we want to remove as much of the friction as possible from the experience here at Fenway Park. And for me, getting a guest access portal out of the way of a fan that's just trying to get connected is like a very easy, low-hanging fruit way to do that.
Well, thank you for doing that. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to come there. I'm going to download all my videos. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
please do.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'll test it. I'll test it out. And so let's talk about like video and how that works. But I'll tell you a story. And again, obviously you saw from the '86 Mets. I'm
Mhm.
kind of old, but if you remember the incident in New York where Sully Sullenberger landed the plane in the Hudson River
Mm.
and saved all the people and had
Yeah.
this, he had the Seagull strike and he landed there.
Yeah.
That day, I was invited into MLB.com's building and they gave me a tour and they showed me this incredible setup they
Yeah.
had there. And that was
Yeah.
like years ago. I'm sure it's a lot better.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
they were saying like they make the calls, they videotape everything. But is it happening on premise at Fenway, or are they doing it? Like how does the video work and all the angles? Are they making the calls, or is somebody at Fenway making the calls?
Yeah, well, they get a feed, right? So like the instant replay center is in New York, Adam. So like if a play is challenged, fast forwarding to today where it's instant replay, like that call is made out of that sort of like war room that you see on the broadcast from time to time with all the different monitors that have every game going on nationally. But those feeds, those cameras are obviously here, so like they're being delivered, to kind of like a head end and then ultimately sent, via very high speed internet back to MLB for the instant replay center. That video also finds its way to the MLB network, because we're doing a lot of like post production and in-game production, for every team around the league. So like we have very fast internet pipes coming in and out of our venues, for all sorts of things. But like MLB, thankfully for me, MLB sits on top of our business, as as sort of a governing body. And so they manage instant replay, they manage the automated balls and strike system, they manage our websites, the entire digital experience. And so
Okay.
a lot of those services are delivered over MLB's rails. And so they're on the hook technically to make sure that those systems stay up, that they're performing well, that they're doing what they need to do. So like my job day game is hard. It would be infinitely harder if I had to manage all of those kind of like game critical services that we do today.
But are they telling you where to set up the angles for the video, or is that something you do, or a collaboration?
They're doing it. Yeah. So and this is like a standard footprint and template that they have, Adam. And every stadium's different, right? So like you have to locate cameras, in different like different places, so you can get good camera angles of home plate and the pitcher's mound and first and third base and like the foul lines. So we do have a standard template, for where we locate cameras. Sometimes that deviates a little bit, and the Hawkeye system can compensate for that. But yeah, we don't tell MLB where to place their cameras. They do all of that work for us.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't know. Have you been there? It's a pretty cool place.
It's
They won't let me in
amazing.
there
Yeah.
anymore because they think I'm bad luck from the plane crash. But
Yeah, and that building has moved since then. So you were there at a time where MLB.com was separate from Major League Baseball. Now it's kind of like all one company merged together. So that replay center has moved to the new corporate headquarters in downtown Manhattan. Yeah.
so do
So
you have like I don't know, do you want to call them IT or creative folks like that are using systems? Who's doing the animations and like the drawings on the board? Is that something that is happening again at Fenway, or is that somewhere offsite?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about kind of like the Hawkeye system, sort of like, call it like the automated balls and strike system, where you see like in a quadrant, the location of the pitch, like all of that is sort of owned by MLB. The Hawkeye system is creating those visuals and sending it to our scoreboard folks who have technology integrated to scoreboards so that that visual just sort of finds its way onto the board. All of the in-game animations and creative, like that's all done in-house by our video productions folks. And there's a whole bunch of employees sitting in a little bit of a war room, above, like just adjacent to our press box at Fenway behind home plate, who are managing the in-game experience and sending content to the scoreboard.
I'm trying, you just brought up the scoreboard. I mean, so you obviously have some big display that's up there, and I mean that's massive. But I kind of remember, maybe I'm wrong, but don't you have like that very antique, old-fashioned looking scoreboard? Or is that
Not
like
anymore.
limited
Yeah, I
back?
mean, most of our scoreboards are fairly modern, so it's yeah, we have a lot of, I mean, this is a museum here, right? I mean, this is the oldest park in Major League Baseball, so like if you were to walk through the concourse, you would see lots of, old display technologies, artwork, but like within the seating bowl of the stadium, we've modernized the look and feel of our scoreboard and display technology. So it could always be better, but it's not what your father would have remembered if he was here for a ball game in the 80s.
I remember they would like hand put I don't know, maybe
Oh yeah, So out in the Green Monster, we do have a manual scoreboard. So there's a guy inside the Green Monster.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know what you were referring to. Yes. So we still have.
It reminds me of like The Natural. Like there was this like guy in there flipping the thing.
Oh, we still have that guy. That's actually a very popular job, if you can believe it, being the guy who, it turns a 1 to a 2 behind the scoreboard.
I want that job. Of course, it's a great job. I wanted to be a ball boy. Who wouldn't want to do this stuff?
Yeah.
So Chris, I mean, this is now enterprise technology at its finest. Like this is like some Fortune company. Explain that a bit more. Like how do you like think about sports and entertainment venues like Fenway Park and what's the protocols? Like how does it? And I don't know if I'm asking that question right, but how do you kind of think about a Fenway Park and other National League stadiums?
So, are you referring to in regards to how we're going to secure it, or
how are you going to secure it? How are you going to manage it? Like how do you get your fingers around all this?
Okay, so essentially the security approach is very similar to any other company, right? You need the identity and access controls in place. You need to ensure that your data is encrypted. Network segmentation is super important, for your IoT devices and other things you want to segment out. And you need to ensure that you do have, monitoring and detective controls in place. In addition to that, right, governance absolutely is a big key piece of this, right? As far as access, retention, and auditability of data. Sports teams these days increasingly resemble financial institutions and data protection needs. So as Randy's technology outcomes evolve, they're really turning into the blueprint of a financial institution,
like a data company.
Yeah. Yep. Minus I would imagine that they don't have the scrutiny for some of the auditing that a banking institution would have, but it's, I'm sure the Red Sox and every other organization out there have tons of dashboards to monitor, and they're always looking at alerts and things like that. So it's very similar to how a normal IT operation would run.
Okay, let's stay with the fans for a second, and we talk about the fan experience, and so how, and this is for both you guys. I don't know how it works, but how are AI and analytics helping teams personalize the fan journey for the people that are going to the game? Like, or do you speak to them based on some kind of a cookie that what they're interested in, or how does it work? I mean, I'm talking a little bit roundabout, but how do you personalize their experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're kind of early stages, Adam, from an AI point of view, as it relates to the fan experience. So like, I mean, I'll give you a couple of things that we're working on right now. So like, we're trying to leverage AI and build natural language interfaces on top of our fan survey data, right? So this is sort of like low hanging fruit too, but like, we collect 30,000 surveys from our fans every year. It's very difficult to properly measure sentiment analysis, to categorize the nature of that feedback, to send it downstream to the folks here at Fenway Park who are responsible for that area, whether or not the fan had a concern about their experience with like parking or ticketing or concessions or security, and so we're leaning into AI to help us glean insights into the fan feedback we're getting via surveys, right? So like, our customers won't necessarily know that we're doing that, but what it's doing that they're not aware of is helping us more effectively service their concerns, get back to them faster, address the positive or negative experience that they had here at Fenway Park. And so, and we're using it for a number of other things, not necessarily fan facing. We do have within the digital experience, kind of like chatbots, I mean, every business who has sort of like a customer service or call center function, is integrating chatbot technology. Increasingly that's AI driven. So we're not, we're planning on, modernizing our call center, taking advantage of AI to help our fans just get a quick answer to a question that they have. Right now it's not, if you call at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and we're playing at 7, not easy to get a person on the phone. It's like there's a lot more of our customers than there are of us to take those phone calls. But like we have the equivalent of that digital experience via chatbot in the MLB ballpark app. If someone has a quick question, they can get a quick answer, and that's kind of an AI driven experience. But we're trying to not automate away our interactions with fans, right? So if we want to be very careful about how we introduce AI and put it in front of customers, it really needs to be a quality experience. It needs to work. It needs to not be a step backwards, right? So like we're being very thoughtful and intentional about where we mix in AI, especially when it comes to the fan experience.
Does it help you? I mean, because I like to eat the hot dogs, but does it help you figure out how to shorten the lines? Because there's usually like a surge in between innings. I don't know. Are you using it for any of the concessions?
No, not really. It's tricky, Adam, because it's like, even I don't think AI would tell us anything earth-shattering about the way that fans move within the concourse and at concession stands that our eyeballs don't tell us. Right. And so and we have video surveillance cameras everywhere. I do think, and we've looked into in the past, buying sort of like these wait time intelligence cameras where you draw a zone around a concession stand, see how people move within it and measure the pace and rate at which people move through those concession stands. And, the challenge is we're not really necessarily learning anything we don't know. Right. It's like in between innings, we know the concourses are crowded. We can't make more space here at Fenway.
Right.
So there's sort of diminishing returns a little bit in certain use cases where leveraging AI and analytics to describe a problem that you already know you have and where there's not an easy solution to engineer, is hard. In other cases, game on, right? Fan behavior and ticketing information and what moves the needle for ticket sales and concession sales and season ticket holder renewals. There's lots of data sources we can integrate and leverage AI on top of that and machine learning tools to more intelligently understand fan behavior. But within the stadium, it's tricky because there's not a whole lot we can do, even if AI spit out some incredibly insightful thing we weren't aware of. It's not an easy tool to solve the type of problem we're talking about.
Okay. And so, Chris, it's game day. It's happening. People are coming into the park. They're getting their souvenirs. They're sitting down, getting their beers. What's the biggest IT challenge on game day? I didn't mean to just throw that hot fastball at you, but what could you tell me?
Just availability. That's the huge piece of it. It's the uptime is so important. And again, getting back to the network latency, things need to be up. They need to be speedy. Those are the two pretty core components. At least in my opinion. Randy may have some additional things that he stresses about. But that's as somebody that's not in Randy's position, as the consumer of the technology, that would be my that's how I feel.
But how do you prep? I mean, are you testing it before the game? Are you running some kind of speed test or anything like that?
Yeah,
Well, I'm sure there are some
yeah.
ongoing data analytics that are happening, from game to game, and they can adjust, settings or load balance some things differently, things of that nature. But Randy, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I mean, I was just going to say, we're constantly proactively, performance monitoring our systems here. Obviously, the network is the foundation of every service that we deliver here, right? So the wired network, making sure that we have those redundancies built in, that we're monitoring things, that we're managing uplinks and looking for issues on the network that could lead to performance challenges. Same thing on the wireless network. We're constantly monitoring. We have a whole sort of network operations center here with we're visualizing the real-time status of the network, wired and wireless. So we have people here every game, caretaking those systems to make sure that those services that need to be delivered are being delivered. So it's, and again, there is a bifurcation between the back office mission critical business and baseball systems that we need to maintain for the Red Sox versus the ones MLB needs to deliver for the on-field experience and the broadcast experience. And so we have lots of constituents here. We have the Red Sox, we have MLB, we have our concessionaire, we have a merchandising partner, and we have our regional sports network. So there's lots of people here, who have different missions, different network infrastructures, parallel network infrastructures to deliver their respective services.
That's cool. And so I know when I go to my game, my Wi-Fi is going to be working, and that scoreboard is going to be working, and I'm excited, and I can interact on my phone. Cool, thank God. So if you had to predict the next major tech breakthrough, and this is to both of you guys, in professional sports, what would it be? What's
Okay.
the next big thing?
I'll throw one out. That's I don't know if it's a big thing, Adam. Biometrics is a big deal now in the league. Both behind the scenes, just as in terms of like an authentication provider, a multi-factor solution, but also for the fan experience, right? So like there's a new platform within MLB called Go Ahead, and there's two components to that. There's Go Ahead Entry, Go Ahead Pay. The whole premise of that is using biometrics to substitute for your ticket and for your credit card, right? So I think one of the things that you'll notice in MLB stadiums, and if you visited San Francisco, Philly, Houston, late last year, you probably saw these systems. But I would envision at Fenway over the next few years, people are going to walk through the gates as naturally as they would if there were no impediment to walking into Fenway. They're also going to be paying, with biometrics. So you're not going to have to pull out your credit card anymore. You're going to walk up to a point of sale terminal. If you're registered with the Go Ahead platform, you're just going to pay with a facial scan. So it's Apple Pay for biometrics, right? So I think that's the one big.
So it's like clear.
It's clearish. Yeah, exactly. So there's an access control element and there's a commerce element to it, right? So that's one thing you're going to see in major venues.
You know what I do hate though? When I go to Disney, I hate going to Disney. Don't make me. But when I go, you have to put your finger on the mouse head, and it's got to turn green. And sometimes it just doesn't work. But is that biometrics, or is that like old style biometrics?
Yeah, well, we're going to be using facial instead of fingerprint.
I think the eye is better.
It sure is. I know there's a little bit of a creep out factor though for our customers, for retinal. So I don't think that will get there. So.
No, I mean, I use Clear all the time. It's never, I mean, it's always on. Like it always knows it's me. So that seems to work.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and it's not like getting through the clear line at the airport isn't always faster. I've observed.
Well,
so like, yeah. So in our case, if you're registered with the platform, you're truly just going to walk through the gates like there's nothing in your way.
Awesome.
So that's the experience we're going for. Yeah, again, gets back to like removing the friction from the fan experience. Like we're asking a lot of our customers, especially in Boston, it's not easy to get here. So when you're here, it should be easy.
I wonder what the Soccer World Cup is going to do. Is this going to be a mob scene at these stadiums? I mean, I hope they have some of this stuff.
I know. I feel bad for
going to be impatient people.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Just a football game on a normal day in Foxborough is a challenge. Imagine the World Cup.
Yeah. No,
I mean, Randy, what are your thoughts on biometrics and AI in regards to safety and
it's
security? With the cameras.
It's a timely conversation, Chris. I don't think any of the four major sports teams are using AI currently for facial recognition on the security front. There's data privacy concerns, obviously.
Right.
So I think like in a perfect world, like we should have awareness. It's like if someone was on our ban list, for example, there's a few people on the permanent ban list. I would love to have a world where like we load all of those facial profiles into our surveillance platform. And this isn't like AI, right? This is basic sort of like video surveillance capabilities that exist everywhere. It's just not necessarily something that we're doing today, right? Like, so you can imagine a world where like, suspicious behavior that we're pulling in from a camera feed, could have an AI overlay to it where like, this is unusual.
Right.
So like an AI model picks that out and lets us know about that. So like our surveillance platform providers aren't able to do that currently, but there are bolt-ons that you could layer on top of a video surveillance platform that would let you do that. Right. So it's something I'm definitely thinking about. We're navigating sort of like this really, interesting regulatory landscape that exists in this state, and others. It's not as hard in other states, but it's not impossible, right? So like I just think no one's really sort of like done it yet. So, but it is definitely coming, I think.
Is Chris's family banned?
No, just me.
No.
No,
Randy let me in the doors once, and then he's like,
definitely,
no more.
definitely. Yeah, you're on the white list.
That's great. And so
Yeah.
it seems like sports, and obviously the Red Sox are way ahead of the curve. But if other businesses looked at what you're doing, what is something that they might pick up from what you guys do that they can apply to other industries that would help them with real-time data? My guess is retailers, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Adam. We're customer obsessed here, right? So like, what I would probably discuss with whoever it is that wanted to chat about our approach, is sort of like, the way that we implement sort of like data warehousing, the way that we sort of like, build a 360-degree view of the fan, based on their interactions with us, that we can harvest, based on their engagement with us across a bunch of different channels, right? So like we do have a fairly sophisticated data warehousing capability. And so that helps us improve the fan experience. It helps us, measure and identify opportunities to target customers who might not otherwise come to a game. Like, we're very good now, by the way, these like theme nights. It's like all the rage now in MLB. We've won awards year after year about, and like those ideas, come from some of the attributes and behaviors that we've been able to capture about fan behavior. And it influences the way that we approach our customers for opportunities to come to the park when they might not otherwise come. Right. So like that's not as much of a kind of like in your face, like here's how we do things at Fenway, within, like inside the concourse or on the field of play. It's more behind the scenes, our approach is sort of like, managing our customer data and monetizing it and measuring our success.
So theme nights are huge. That's a big deal.
Theme nights are massive. Yeah. And like, I'll tell you, like it's February, like, as you know, up here in Boston, it's still kind of cold, right? So like, we're competing against the NBA. We're still, the hockey season is rip roaring. We have 3 major sports going at that time, so like getting butts and seats in April, not easy to do. If you were to have a Star Wars theme night, the people will come. Like we know that to be true, so like we try and get creative for those times of the year where it's not like the Yankees on a weekend in the summer. We know we're going to sell out. We don't need to give stuff away to get people here. They will come. In April, it's harder, right? So like we try and get creative.
So who is the marketing genius that came up with the baseball bat night where they gave 50,000 weapons to all the drunken people at the stadium? I think they stopped it after the first one, but
oh my goodness gracious, yeah.
I don't know. You don't have that, I hope.
I don't. Yeah, we've got those bats kicking around everywhere. We never thought to use them as weapons, but I could see how they could be used that way.
Well, in New York, it was a big deal. By the 6th or 7th inning, it was trouble. So,
yeah.
So I mean, and my guess also is that baseball is more popular now than it was. Like it was always popular when I was a kid, but the speed of the game has picked up. So I think people are much more interested in it than ever before. So
yeah, the pace of play, and the pitch clock, Adam, has been like a game changer. That's always been the biggest challenge. If you're a family of 5 and like you're stuck here till 2 a.m. because like it's a 19-inning game. Like, I mean, you can't come to Fenway. You just can't do it. So like the pace of play, it's for the TV experience too, equally as important. Like people can't be, especially on the East Coast, like, be stuck watching a game till, 11:30 at night. So these games are, like almost universally like 2.5 hours now, whereas before they could go, now we have this whole new rule with the ghost runner and extra innings, man on second automatically in extra innings. So like there's a lot of changes that we made that would kind of like your grandpa might turn over in his grave if he saw what baseball looks like now. But like as both a fan and someone who's mindful of the fan experience, and like the game is slow, right? So like, children nowadays, like it's hard to get them to sit here in the park for 3 hours and watch a baseball game, right? So like we need to do what we can to modernize the game, make it more interesting, and speed it up.
talk to the Brits and get them to do that to cricket, because that is a tough one. So,
Yeah.
so Chris, what am I not asking? That's great, because we're going to start wrapping things up in a minute or so. So,
Mhm.
what cool stuff am I not asking that we're allowed to ask?
No, I mean, I think you covered everything, Adam. It's
Mhm.
again, it's all about availability. Um,
Mhm.
that's the key factor. That the transparency of the technology to the fan base. To have technology there that enables all this functionality and all these cool things, and have it not even be noticed by the fan, I think is a key takeaway.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So.
So Randy, if Chris and I come down there, will you show us Hawkeye?
Of course. Yeah, we'll give you a
Yeah.
backlot tour. It's pretty mind-blowing to see it work. So, and
Like,
talk about an edge computing paradise. Like that is that.
Yeah,
That's
I would
not,
love
it's
to
not
check
a
that out, Randy.
service. Yeah, that's not a service that we could cloud enable. Like we need to process ungodly amounts of high resolution, high frame rate video here at the park,
Yep.
visualize
And
it immediately, put it on the scoreboard, send it to New York.
and that's
that
where
is
that edge
awesome.
computing comes into play, in
Yes,
that particular use
exactly.
case.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So with that, any final thoughts from you, Randy, and then we're going to wrap things up here.
No, I don't think so. I mean, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you guys. I mean, I could chat with you all day long, about all of this stuff. I know we had lots of questions that we couldn't get to. Happy to do a part two if you think it's worthwhile. But
Would love to.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, that would be great.
When you win the pennant, we'll be back. You got a
Let's run
long
it back.
season ahead of you.
Absolutely. Yep. Hold me
So
to it.
so with that, I mean, I know you don't want a ton of torturous email, but like how could people, if they wanted to, like, are you on LinkedIn? Could people DM you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about what we discussed today, feel free to find me there. And, I'm happy to chat with you.
Awesome. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think this was such a great session, Randy. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
joining
No,
us. I learned a lot, and you really have a unique technology environment in play
Mhm.
over there. I didn't mean to be dismissive about, all right, it's basically, just like any other company. There
Mhm.
are some things that are very unique to your environment that other
Yeah.
companies are just not dealing with, right?
Yeah. Right.
But at the very core, very similar in nature. You
Mhm.
have servers, you have network.
Right.
You need to secure the data.
Mhm.
All that fun stuff. So,
Yes. Yep.
but yeah, it's like Adam. Growing up on this stuff and just seeing
Mhm.
the evolution of the technology is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
It's whether you're at you know Fenway or at Gillette or whatever.
Mhm.
You guys are just doing some amazing things. So yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
Appreciate it. Yeah.
it's fun to be
well,
on the ride.
Randy, I want to be your assistant or the guy that flips the score, one of those two. But you have an awesome gig. It's you have a passion for the mission, which is
Mhm.
like amazing. And so thanks again for being on the show. And I just wanted to do a shout out to Acronis. Acronis helps us support the show and sponsors us a bit. And so thank
Mhm.
you, Acronis. Uh, thanks for your help. And with that, let's wrap it up.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond the Firewall podcast powered by HubTech. If you found this conversation useful, follow or subscribe wherever you listen to stay updated on new episodes. For more information about HubTech's IT solutions and services, please visit hubtech.com.